think everybody has questions, correct?
Yes, go.
Good afternoon. It is Tuesday, January 23rd, 2024. Welcome to this afternoon's school board briefing. The time is 2:30 p.m. Sergeant Arms, has the front lobby been cleared?
Yes.
Thank you. Board Member Patrika will be joining us via Zoom. Ms. Patrika, are you on?
Yes, ma'am, I'm present.
Excellent. Today's agenda includes construction change order report, November and December 2023, policy review, disposition of 69 plus acres at 20897 Three Oaks Parkway, academic outcomes, accountability and assessment update on schools, grades, and the strategic plan, agenda review, January 23rd, 2024 for the action meeting, public comment, good of the order, and board member comments and reports. This afternoon, we're going to begin with the construction change order report of November and December 2023. And this afternoon, we're welcoming Mr. Frederick Ross, Executive Director, Operational Planning and Project Management.
And Frederick would be here, Madam Chair, but he is otherwise occupied with many of the maintenance and construction projects. And in his stead, we have the luxury of having Mr. Scott Rickenbacker provide the report as he normally does.
Good afternoon, board members. Dr. Bernier, Kathy DeWay Bruno, Esquire. This is the better looking version. Just saying. This is your required by statute capital update for November 2023 and December of 2023. On the first sheet in your attachment, you will see that we did direct material purchases in the amount of $1,037,088.58. A return on the tax savings to the district of $58,978.26. We had non-direct material purchases, change orders, non-direct change orders for $74,891.96 with a return back to the district of $74,891.96. We had contingency adjustments on projects for the amount of $66,804.32. On the backup sheet that goes along with this reporting, you will see that we have 6 direct material purchases change orders done for the projects during that month. We have 5 regular change orders done on projects for that month, and we have 6 contingency adjustments done for projects during that month. Are there any questions on the backup material supporting the report?
Board members, any questions? Yes, Mr. Fisher.
Just a general question. I've already asked this, and this will most likely be to the superintendent. I just wanted to make sure that we are currently on track with our Franklin Park build at the moment.
The last report I got from Mr. Rickenbacker and Mr. Stevens was we are still on track. I know Mr. Rickenbacker has been on the campus since my last visit, so I will get a further update from Scott for you at this time.
We are on track. Some of the contingency adjustments you may see for Franklin Parks, we have a project escalation and material delay. In order to maintain schedule, you'll see a future contingency where we switched emergency generators because the delivery time to the site did not work with the project schedule. So yes, we are on track. We're maintaining that. That is priority 1 with the district. So right now we are tracking in all phases of that project.
Thank you, Mr. Rickenbacker. That's all I had, Chair.
Any other questions? All right, seeing none, thank you so much for stepping in this afternoon.
Well, we got one more.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, we have December.
December 2023, as you can see, we had direct material purchases of $1,416,155.17. Tax savings on that was $79,380.14 returned to the district. We had non-direct change orders in the amount of $885,987.83. $885,987.83 was returned back to the district. Those are typically project savings. And we had contingency adjustments in the amount of $160,735.69. The backup sheet supporting that. We have 6 direct material purchase change orders, 3 change orders, project specific, and 6 construction and contingency adjustments. And for those who don't know, direct material purchases, we purchase the material directly, and we save on tax. So we deduct it from the contractor's fee. He still manages it, and we reap the benefits with the tax saving, which comes back to the district. And that's it. Any questions?
Board members, any questions? Ms. Jordan?
This is probably off topic of this. So the steel that we had purchased before, are we using that for Riverdale?
The steel that we have currently that was purchased for a previous project is still housed at Canal, the last time I spoke with you. There are aspects of the steel being utilized in the Riverdale project. They're also identifying other uses for the steel moving forward, which would allow us to cut on direct material purchases. And there still is a plan in some cases where the ROTC training towers need to be replaced. They're currently on, if you will, telephone poles. They'll be replaced with steel structure if the steel is still available at the time that those projects are due.
Thank you, and that's great to know. That's where the savings, that we have those savings is being shown. So thank you for that. Appreciate that.
Ms. Patrica, do you have any questions?
No, thank you.
Madam Chair.
Okay. Yes,
Madam Chair, I
sir.
just want to be clear. Ms. Jordan said something towards the end of that this is where the material savings are coming in. And there's nothing reflected here that speaks to the steel being used at Riverdale at this point. These are direct material purchases, and if I'm understanding Mr. Reckenbacher, after watching him present multiple times, what you see in the parentheses are the tax savings that we get based upon purchasing this for the builder. So we get the tax savings as an educational institution. If you'd like further update on how that steel is being utilized, I will get with Mr. Rickenbacher and Mr. Stevens following this meeting, and we can get you an additional update this Friday in your board update.
No, that's fine. Maybe I misspoke. I'm just saying that because we are using that, this allows us to, not that this particular items that you have on here is savings, but it does help us in the end.
100%.
Okay.
Thank you for allowing me to clarify.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Moving on, the next item on our agenda is policy review. This is a pre-brief of the policies listed on the agenda, and we welcome School Board Attorney and General Counsel, Mrs. Dupay Bruno, and Benny Bruffy from Legal Services.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. At this time, does the board have any concerns or questions with regards to the policies that are being pre-briefed today?
Mr. Persons.
Yes, I'd like to look at the one on controversial topics.
I believe that's 2240. Ms. Brophy still logging on.
Why can't I not get out of change orders? There we go. My policy review will come up.
Madam Chairman, we seem to be having some technical difficulty where we're just getting the circle. We're not able to log on.
Yep.
Yeah, my attachments aren't showing. Is anybody else having any luck?
I finally, they just came up.
Mine came up just now.
Just a minute ago, just a second ago. Yes, it's spinning. Ah, there we go. Mic is on. Thank you.
Madam Chairman, we continue to have some technical difficulty where the website's not even loading on this, on the display computer.
My question was on the first line of that policy. Con incognito.
Yeah, okay. You got it?
I'm going to
you
log
want me to read
out
it?
and back in.
It says the school board believes that the consideration of controversial issues has a legitimate place in the instructional program of the schools. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, I mean, it sort of like encourages it where, I mean, we know it's going to happen, but if the first line just says, oh, we believe we should be doing, probably doesn't really, and then it goes on later to define when you can and when you can't. I just don't think that line is needed.
They're having an issue with their page.
I think we just need to have a
Yeah, Board Docs
definition
as
of what controversial curriculum is, which I think is the next paragraph.
Us to move this portion of the agenda item to the end, as we can't even log into Board Doc. There apparently is a slight problem with
Yes,
Board
I was
Docs
just
at
going to
this time.
suggest that.
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. All right, so we're going to readjust the agenda for now. Is Dr. Malloy here? Okay,
Yes, Madam Chair, Dr. Malloy is present.
okay.
And I just want to make sure, Madam Chair, that the board is in agreement to go ahead and move that agenda item to the end.
Board, are there any, is anyone against moving it to the end of the meeting today? Okay, great. All right, so while Dr. Malloy comes on up, we are, if you just logged on to the meeting, we're just moving policy to the end. So next on the agenda is disposition of 69 plus acres at the 20897 Three Oaks Parkway site. And presenting for us today is Dr. Adam Malloy, the Director of Planning, Growth, and Capacity. Thank you for being flexible.
I think it's going to have the same problem.
Take a brief recess.
Yeah, I can't get in.
Good afternoon. Director Adam Malloy, Planning, Growth, and Capacity. Today I'm here to provide information regarding the disposition, sale of 2897 Three Oaks Parkway, a 69 plus minus acre tract of land for $15 million to the village of Estero. This property is located along the westerly right-of-way of Interstate 75 and along the easterly right-of-way line of Three Oaks Parkway. The presentation will follow the agenda laid out on slide 2, covering various aspects. It includes information about the state statute governing the sale of school district-owned land, details on the development and growth in the area, specifics about the property being sold, and a concise summary of the analysis of disposition, addressing both opportunities and obstacles. I do apologize for referencing the slide, but I believe it's crucial to highlight the statutory guidance concerning property disposition. According to Florida Statute 1013.281, a district school board, the Board of Trustees for the Florida School for the Deaf and the Blind, or a Florida College System Institution Board of Trustees has the authority to dispose of any land or real property that the board determines through resolution to be unnecessary for educational purposes as recommended in an educational plant survey, following rules set by the State Board of Education. In the case of 2897 Three Oaks Parkway, it was identified as unnecessary for educational purposes in the most recent educational plant survey, which was approved June 27, 2023. Slide 4 emphasizes new developments in the area, with planning closely monitoring phased development throughout the district and considering projected student generation statistics in the 10-year forecast models. Notably, the sizable developments such as Orchid, Verdana, and Kingston, along with the students they will bring, play a crucial role in our ability to collaborate with developers to acquire and construct schools in and around these communities. A key aspect in the decision analysis of disposing of the Three Oaks property is the imperative to prioritize growth east of 75 on Corkscrew. Slide 5 outlines the appraisal details. The average of 2 appraisals from Maxwell Hendry Simmons and Carlson Norris is $9,737,500. Both appraisal reports are attached to tonight's agenda. The sale price of $15 million exceeds the average appraisal value by $5,262,500. For context, both firms are on the school district's vendor list for property appraisals. and were shared with the village to prevent bias. Below are specific details concerning the disposition of the Three Oaks property. The cost per acre, sale price, broker fees, settlement fees, and estimated net revenue are presented in a format similar to the board action agenda item scheduled for approval at tonight's meeting. The projected net revenue for the district from the property sale is $14,263,925.25. When comparing it to the purchase price in 2003 of $5.8 million, there is a difference of $8,463,925.25. According to statute, this amount will be reallocated in capital improvement dollars in the upcoming budget. The property disposition analysis slide offers a high-level overview of key aspects surrounding the sale of 2897 Three Oaks Parkway. The property is consistently deemed surplus, unnecessary for educational purposes, and situated in a slow growth or low growth area. Its composition, with a significant wetland percentage and drainage challenges, presents a hurdle for potential developers. These obstacles are presented transparently to highlight the complexities associated with selling a large school district property. Planning recommends that the school district strategically dispose of the property to better address capacity and student growth needs. I'll now hand it over to the board and superintendent for discussion. Thank you.
I don't have any real comments other than just to share. I'd like to thank Mr. Malloy, Dr. Malloy, for his work and effort related to this. I know that there has been some concern raised, but we've been talking about the sale of this piece of property since October. We recently, last fall, presented all of the surplus properties to the board. I know there's been a request for an additional presentation. We will certainly come back with that. But myself and Dr. Malloy stand at the ready to listen to your discussion and answer any questions you may have. I do believe that it was my request to bring this as a briefing item because I felt the board needed to have an opportunity to discuss it prior to taking action on it this evening.
All right, before I go to the board, I'm going to go ahead and give Ms. Patrick an opportunity to comment or if she has any questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I feel very comfortable voting on this tonight. As Dr. Bernier just indicated, this piece of property and the reason for its sale, the reason why we're selling it, has been made quite clear both in public meetings and in several one-on-ones with the superintendent. So thank you for coming to me first, but frankly, I don't have any questions. I feel very comfortable taking action this evening. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other comments or questions from board members? Ms. Giovanelli?
First of all, I wanted to thank you for, Dr. Malloy, for putting the part of the resolution. My concern was that the process, I want to make sure that we did the process and had opportunity for the community to be able to have weigh-in input. That was my concern, is did we follow the process and the law regarding, I sent a statute to school board attorney, and I was waiting for that information because that is probably my biggest concern, is that we have, done everything for the best opportunity for the community to understand why we are going to now sell this, because this property has quite the history and some stigma that is attached to it, and that's some of the information that I've requested, because I can remember having a briefing on it back when I first became a school board member with Mr. Mora had put this in the surplus to be sold for the reasons that we're selling it today. Yet it took on a whole new aspect when we went from going to block lane to this property without having really community input, and changing the plan that was initially set forth. So that's why I kind of pause a little bit on how we're moving forward. I don't oppose the sale because as it was explained to me back in the day from Mr. Mora, the whole issue has always been, once the front piece of property was sold to the U.S. Postal Service, there really was no access but one way in and one way out, and that's not, for safety reasons and things, that's not a good possibility for a school. But like I said, this property has some history and changed, and we spent a lot of money on it, going from Block Lane to this property, and we wasted a lot of money, quite honestly. And so therefore, I want to be real clear that, and I want the community to understand how we got here today. Thank you.
Madam Chair, to the question on the legal statute, both myself and Mr. Bruno are prepared to respond to that if you see that as appropriate.
By all means, thank you.
First, Kath.
A question was posed with regards to Florida Statute 373.089, which also discusses the sale of surplus land. However, that statute, by the definition regarding the governing board, is not a school district. That is specifically talking about water management districts. We are governed by Florida Statute 1013.28. That's the statute that we relied on for our process. And another thing, I just want to make sure that the board is clear. Resolutions are motions. Sometimes we write them fancier than other times, but they are essentially a motion. And the history of our district is just to include the language that is required by statute in the recommended action in the motion that the board is taking.
Based upon that comprehensive answer, unless there are questions, I don't have anything to add to Mr. Bruno at this time.
Go ahead, Ms. Giovanelli.
Well, and I might as well, I mean, I have it in my questions later, but I mean, I don't know why we can't nip it in the bud now.
Go ahead.
One of my concerns is, I know we talk about what we're going to net, but we really aren't netting that when the expenses that we've spent on Block Lane and again on this property. After we had decided to put it up for sale, then they took it off the market and was going to build a school on it. So I would like to know what those costs were, and that, because that really needs to come off of this 14 million that we're supposedly getting. I think it's just for transparency and being honest with the community that we screwed up. Thanks.
Madam Chair, members of the board, Ms. Giovanelli, it's an excellent question. I can give you some assurances at this point that we will dig deeper into that, because you are correct. And I think I want to be more explicit because I was not here for Block Lane and some of those other decisions. But you are correct. When the school district was going to potentially use this property to build on, there was some work done in order to design a building to fit. So there were costs related to hiring an architect and designing a K-8 for that. We also bought some steel, which we'd had before we got into this item. We've already had the discussion about that steel is being reutilized, and while there is an expense according to that, we are able to save expenses in other projects by still utilizing that steel that was purchased for a particular school building. We would need to make sure that we got together with both Frederick Ross, Scott Rickenbacker, and Larry Stevens, just to be sure that we pull the correct information. But you are correct. There was some additional investment beyond the purchase of the property when the school district made a determination to build on that piece of property. I can get you that. I can get you those numbers. I got questions a little after 1 o'clock today. I didn't have time to pull people out of the field and necessarily get all that information today. The numbers that Dr. Malloy put out relative to the profit made off the sale of the property are accurate. Were there additional expenses related to building on the property? Absolutely, we can come back with a revised figure if that's the board's request.
Ms. Jordan.
I would personally like to see what the bottom line is as well, as far as expenses that have already been used, and then take that off of the bottom line. Just
so then I need
to be out there, not necessarily at this moment, but I think that in the long run, we really need to know what those real numbers are.
So I would need some additional clarification as to real numbers, because in my mind, and I apologize for not being here longer than that, in my mind, I understand the expenses related to the 4-lettered middle school K-8 center that you were going to build and what those costs would be. But when people start talking about Block Lane and other things, I don't have the historical, and nor do I believe that my chief operations officer has that historical perspective as well. So there may be the need for an offline or public conversation with either an individual board member or the entire group to help me to get the scope and breadth and width of what you're looking for when it comes to additional costs related to this particular piece of property. Not other properties that we bought and sold, but to this particular piece of property, I can see the expense to buy it and what the district was planning to invest and did make some purchases relating to building a school on that site. So I apologize for having to ask for a history lesson, but I don't have all of the information that people with historical reference have.
And I appreciate that because I was not here when they first started that as well. So that was before my time even. But as far as what was spent on that location with architect or whatever that looks like there at that location, because the numbers, of course, obviously we're making money off of the sale of that, but are we really making money off of that, or are we breaking even? Because I just look at my line of work. What is the end, product versus sales? Where do we come?
Well, for instance, I don't want to put a number on it because I don't want to misspeak on a public record, but hiring an architect is in at least the million of a dollar. But I will tell you that in the specific, the way this district had some forethought regarding that project design, the school district actually owns those plans. So those plans can be reutilized at any time. If you build a prototype but you don't own the plans, every time you reuse them, you have to pay that architect a cost for their design. This was an expense, but now we own the plans. If we ever build a K-8, we can utilize those plans appropriately, and we'll be using them as a guide as we move forward with a potential K-8 out in the Cape. So, but we can find out exactly what that cost for that architect was, what is the cost for the steel, and other things that we may have pre-purchased in anticipation of building on this piece of property.
Okay, I'm going to go to Mr. Persons, and I'll go back to Ms. Giovanelli.
Wow, this is a very interesting history lesson on how much all the extra money was spent. What we're talking about here is the cost of the land, what it cost us and what we're selling it for, and is that a good deal, and is that a good stewardship of the money? And I really don't see where a past mistake as far as doing all the other has anything to do with the sale of the land. I mean, let's say it was even much more. Does that mean we're not going to sell the land? I mean, it just doesn't really have a lot to do with it. If it was a penny or if it was 100 million, the land was bought for over 5 million, is selling for 15 million, is appraised at 9 million something. So to me, I feel very comfortable voting on it. But I do agree with you. I would like to know a little more what that amount is, but I don't think we need to bring that into our thought process of whether we would approve this sale or not approve this sale. I don't think it has anything to do with it directly. That's all.
Ms. Giovanelli.
You bring up a great point. So I just would like to remind everybody, we just sold 18.96 acres for $11 million on Palomino. So now we're going to sell 69 acres for $15 million. An appraisal is just an opinion, and I'm a little concerned. This is undervalued. I'm also concerned how it was marketed, and that, I don't believe it was nationally marketed. I believe it was solicited to one buyer, and we're paying enormous real estate fees that our own employee actually negotiated. So I am a little concerned over the sales price. I understand that we have a willing and able buyer, so I'm all about that. So, and I think that's important, but I just based on, if you just do a simple math, based on the Palomino, which is down the road, not very far, similar area basically, the Palomino sold for 11 million, would put this property about 33 million value, just roughly. So I want to make sure everybody's comfortable in that sale, because I can probably get an appraisal done for 33 million. It all, it's an opinion. So,
Dr. Bernier.
I'm going to let Dr. Malloy take additional detail related to the question. I think it's an excellent one. I think, though, you have to be cognizant of comparing properties to properties, and I don't have the knowledge that Ms. Giovanelli has about the real estate business. But Three Oaks is particularly zoned a particular way. It is only zoned for government and agriculture, which means it can only be sold under government and agriculture, and whoever purchased it would have to then apply to the Village of Estero for a change to, in a sense, build, if they wanted to build a multifamily. The Palomino property was different, and I'll let Dr. Malloy speak to that. The other aspect of is we have to look at the 69 acres. We have to look at how much of that land is actually physically buildable. About 40 to 45% of the land that we have over at Three Oaks is wetland, and it cannot be built upon. So, and I'll let Dr. Malloy go deeper into any comparisons he has between the two sales. I just want people to understand, and again, I think if it was zoned multi or a multi-use, single-family home, yes, I think we could do that. But I've also explained why that change in zoning would be so difficult for any potential buyer.
To Ms. Giovanelli's comment about the Palomino sale, that the sale of 13401 Palomino Lane never actually finalized. It was close in 2020 and close again in 2023, but we never finalized that sale. It's currently one of two properties that we are listing for sale and in the process of negotiations with potential buyers. So that Palomino property never closed.
Mr. Malloy, I know the answer to this question, but will you please provide to the board the reason why that property did not move through final sale?
So in 2020, there was an issue related to COVID. In 2023, while it was approved for the board for ratification, the buyer terminated during the inspection process.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Malloy. Any other questions, Ms. Giovanelli?
So I would think we need to be updated on those things, because that was something, I mean, I was unaware that the contract fell through. And that was why I became alarmed. But still, the fact that we did go under contract for $11 million says we would sell it, that 18 acres, almost 19 acres, for $11 million. So I still think it, still, my question is still, doesn't change really. So I just want to make sure that we're getting the best value. And as far as, you can always, Dr. Beer, you can always remediate wetlands. It's just got to have enough money. So it's a possibility that's never can be outruled. And so, you know, like I said, I know that we need to sell this. This goes back to probably 2018. And so I just want to make sure the public is aware of how we got here today. Thank you.
So I'm just going to add on to that. I think these are great questions. I think it's a great conversation to have. I feel confident in my vote tonight because I feel that the superintendent did a great job at getting me up to speed whenever we were having these discussions one-on-one, because I came in, I obviously was not a board member privy to this beforehand. I think that you have a great point, Ms. Giovanelli, when you just talk about, when we talk about getting us up to speed, that possibly these conversations could have been had before it hits an agenda in public, whether it be a workshop or not. And I agree with you about the full, you know, being transparent about everything. But I feel like if we explain what we did today before it gets to this point, I feel like the public will feel confident in where the board's decision is and why things are being done when they're being done, instead of it seeming like it might be in the dark to some constituents of the community. Mr. Fisher?
Thank you, Ms. Langford Fleming. Thank you to Member Giovanelli for bringing this up. I do, you know, as I said, it's about accountability and transparency, and I appreciate it. I wasn't on this board either, but I do agree with you. The district messed up on this before. I wholly agree on that. But what I'm going to ask is, when we're looking at these surplus land sales, and this is kind of a question for the rest of the board, so there's other lands, I'm sure, that have had things that have been, you know, stopped and started before. Are we going to make this part of each surplus sale for this? I understand the history on this one, but is that going to be part of our process and procedure? And I do appreciate you bringing out these questions. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, when we go forward for this, are we setting that precedent forward with that? Thank you.
Ms. Giovanelli?
actually, by being brought up in the briefing, actually I give kudos to the superintendent for doing that. We're doing this before the vote tonight. So actually, he did give that opportunity, and that's what this conversation should be happening, my feeling, because it's about, for the community to understand, it's public tax dollars that public funds, so I think it's a conversation that needed to happen, and I appreciate the district doing that and having that conversation today, whether we like it or not. It's a tough conversation, I actually voted to sell the property both times on Palomino. So, it's a conversation. This has history, and just a really quick history on the Block Lane piece. They were going to build the Innovation School. That was not even a normal, that was going to be glass windows, and then Parkland happened, and no more glass windows. So all of a sudden, then they jumped off of Block Lane onto the Three Oaks property that was listed for sale. So that's why we did a whole architect review and study and spent millions there, and then did it again at Three Oaks. So there's why I am very strongly about how we got here today and not doing this again. I mean, learning from those mistakes is the only way to make sure that we don't do it again. And so it's important to have these conversations because people are human, people make mistakes. And if you don't learn from them, then shame on us. And that's really what this conversation is about today. Will I do it every time? It all depends on the property. It all depends on the sales price. I can't make any promises. I'm going to say what I feel that I'm here to do, a job, and I'm going to do it if I have to. Either way, ever how it is. Thank you.
Ms. Morgan.
I have two comments. The first is that I want the public to be aware that the superintendent and I did discuss this on our one-on-one, so it's not like this is new at the table to me. And I did have the opportunity to ask questions at that time, and that has been percolating for a while, so this is truly nothing new. Secondly, I would say, given some of the comments that have been made at the board table today, it is important that we put the facts out because it's not clear to me that what's being presented is exactly what transpired at the time. So I think it would be a benefit to us and to the public to have it laid out. Thank you.
Mr. Fisher.
One last clarification, I'm sorry. And when I meant the history on, I meant any for property. I mean for looking at whatever, when we're talking about whatever the costs and expenses were on a prior project is what I meant for that, not specific on this one. I just meant generally when we're looking at it, because you say there's different costs and expenses on this one, and then there's different things. So I was talking about that generally. That's what I meant on that. Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I can, I think there's a couple of things that I would like to respond to. First, we have policies and procedures that are defined by the board regarding the purchase and sale of property. We follow those very closely. We will continue to do that. As to the history, while I did know this property had history accompanied it, I do believe that we're talking about a sale of a piece of property. Its history of how this property was going to be utilized, it took me probably up until several months ago as I first introduced this to you, the potential of this in October, and to the public. The reason why we do that one-on-one is buying and purchasing and selling a property as a school board can get interesting as any real estate deal can when you show interest in a piece of property and other developers then start to look at things. It's a competitive market. The one thing that our world is not making any more short of Hawaii is additional property. Right? Hawaii seems to get a few acres every year on the Big Island. So it's a very competitive market, and therefore a lot of the conversations beginning in October went one-on-one, and in some of those one-on-one discussions there was a desire from several board members to go deeper and come back more often and to get additional information, which we secured. So we will continue to follow the policies and procedures. I will look into specifically any additional costs that were associated with this particular piece of property in building the K-8, what sort of investment we made prior to construction, what we purchased, and I will have Dr. Malloy and I will go over the math. We'll subtract that from the overall profit. I can readily assure you that this will be more than a break-even project. There will be additional dollars that we will get from this particular situation. As to the cost in comparison to properties, I go back to what I have to trust from the people who help advise, and that is the Three Oaks property. Its zoning and how it's zoned and who they have to go to have it rezoned is an issue, as well as the percentage of wetlands. And I have to take Ms. Giovanelli at her word, like she takes me for my word. If you think we can mitigate wetlands, I will find out how to do that and be a better steward of that. As to, I want to be clear also, there was a mention of the Innovation School. Keep in mind in the 10-year plan that you approved recently, the Innovation School is there and it's on tree line. So I want to make sure that the public gets that. And I want to finish there by saying thank you for your help to pass a 10-year plan, because passing a 10-year plan makes it very clear to staff that the staff cannot arbitrarily change that 10-year sequential order of how we're going to build schools and our maintenance and construction projects, and nor can a single board member do that. That has to be brought back before this board in order for that 10-year plan to be adjusted or changed. So I thank you for your leadership in looking with me at a way to secure how the next 10 years will work, provided funding levels and other things continue to amount to the dollars that we need to proceed through that plan. For instance, if revenue stream was to dry up, we'd come back to the board to make some decisions as to what the priorities would be. But right now, we have a solid 10-year plan moving forward that we know we can finance, and I look forward to seeing those continued school buildings and renovations continue to be made. So thank you for the opportunity, Madam Chair.
Before we move on, I just want to give Ms. Patrica one more opportunity to have any questions or comments after all that was conversed just now.
Thank you, and I do appreciate the discussion at the table because where I live, it is very clear that the community understands both the history and the sale that will take place today. I have had several members of the community reach out to me over the past several days, frankly, to talk about the sale that will go in front of the board tonight. So it's always refreshing for me to hear this conversation taking place from people who aren't walking into the grocery store in Estero or walking into church in Estero and seeing people who drive by this property every day and have questions about it. So that's really the only thing I wanted to add. And to assure you that from my perspective and the representation I provide to the people in Estero, there are very few questions about what occurred, how it occurred, why it occurred, and why we are where we are today. Thank you.
You're welcome. Board members, any other questions or comments? Thank you. All right, while Dr. Malloy is exiting, I want to go ahead and move to the next item agenda. Just a reminder, we're moving policy to the end of the briefing today. The next item on the agenda is academic outcomes, accountability and assessment update on school grades and the strategic plan. So we would like to welcome Dr. Jennifer Cupid-McCoy, our Deputy Superintendent, Dr. Jeff Spiro, Chief Academic Officer, and Joy Marks, Director of Accountability, Research, and Assessment.
Madam Chair, if I might, this is a regular presentation that would normally be scheduled earlier in the fall when graduation rates and, when school grades are released at a more normal, if you will, a more normal timeline. Because of the shift to a new progress monitoring and ultimately a new PM3 tool known as FAST, the state, as we've presented before, needed to look at the scores and make some determinations as to how to grade schools, looking at particular percentages and otherwise. We also got the luxury last evening of being provided an announcement from the governor's office that state graduation rates have been released. So there will be an update within this presentation from the time that it posted and some additional information shared with you today. We will make sure that all of those documents get placed in board docs so that they're available for the public. I will turn it over to our astute Dr. Marks from the Accountability and Research Team, Dr. Spiro and Dr. Cupid-McCoy for their information regarding accountability and assessment update as it relates to our strategic plan, and reminder that we are setting the baseline moving forward. So these will be the scores that we will utilize looking to next year to show the improvement and then work towards those goals that we work so hard on as we refresh the strategic plan for the school district. Team?
Good afternoon. Thank you, Board, Dr. Bernier, Ms. Dupre-Bruno. Today, you will be presented with an accountability and assessment update on school grades and the strategic plan. Your presenters will be Dr. Jennifer Cupid McCoy, Deputy Superintendent, Dr. Jeff Spiro, Chief Academic Officer, and myself, Joy Marks, Director of Accountability Research and Assessment. Our presentation today will provide information regarding items brought forward during prior presentations, an overview of the Florida Department of Education Accountability System, informational baseline school grade results, progress toward targets on the strategic plan, graduation data, and our next steps. Previous presentations on data, monitoring, and support have included a July 31st presentation by myself on the primary results from the spring 2022-23 school year. Next, the principal supervisors presented on the support schools would be receiving. Dr. Savage brought forward the strategic plan and district scorecard, and most recently, Dr. Cupid McCoy and Dr. Spiro presented on academic initiatives. The model provided on the screen are proficiency-only categories used to calculate the 22-23 informational baseline grades. Due to the 22-23 FAST and BEST assessments being assessed for the first time in the spring of 2023, learning gain categories were not utilized. We will see learning gain categories return to the accountability model for the 23-24 school year, but for today's report, we will utilize the model presented here. Each category allows schools to earn up to 100% of points. Final grades are calculated by dividing the total number of earned percent of points by the number of categories the schools had sufficient results in. So an example would be in elementary school in 22-23, K through 5 schools had an opportunity to earn achievement percents in English language arts, math, and science. This means that their total possible points would have been out of a possible 300, and that's how their percent was calculated. Due to the 22-23 grades being set on new cut scores, Senate Bill 1048 amended Florida State Statute 1008.34 to require that the grading scale to be set so that the percentage of schools that earned an A, B, C, D, or F is statistically equivalent to the 2021-22 school grades. In addition, the following calculation of the informational baseline grades using the new assessment cut scores, which were the school grade point thresholds, were established by school type to ensure the overall results mirrored the 2021-22 results. Presented on the screen is the former scale that all schools and district grades were based on, as well as the newly formed thresholds by school type I just spoke of. Provided on this slide 6 is a breakdown of the school category, elementary, middle, high, and combination schools. Combination schools consist of locations that span multiple grade levels, such as K-8 schools. You're also provided with a breakdown here to see the school district of Lee County schools as well as our charters. 49.4% of our schools earned an A or B based on the new school category thresholds. 46.3% received a C or D. We currently have 4 schools who have received an incomplete. An incomplete signifies a school grade was potentially withheld or revoked and designated as incomplete I. If the data do not accurately represent the progress of the school, the circumstances where data do not accurately represent the progress of the school, as where the percent of students tested at the school or district is less than 95% of the school or district's eligible student population, or before, during, or following the administration of any state assessment, the validity or integrity of the test administration or results are under review and investigation based upon allegations of the test administration and security violations as described in Statute 1008.24 or Rule 6A-10.042. Upon conclusion of the review and investigation and a determination by the Florida Department of Education and the data accurately representing the progress of a school, the department can assign a letter grade to those I schools. The results shown on slide 6 represent our 97 District of Lee County schools, charter schools who received a school grade. We have other special centers and charters that utilize a school improvement score, and in 22-23, school improvement scores were not issued for those improvements, and they will return in the 24-25. Based on the grades presented on slide 6, 70% or 68 of our schools maintained their grade. 18.5% maintained. This instance means that schools' final school letter grade resulted from the 21-22 year is the same as their informational baseline school letter grade result in the 22-23 school year. 18 schools increased by 1 letter grade, and 1 school increased by 2 letter grades. We had 5 schools decrease by 1 letter grade and 1 school by 2 letter grades. And I just want to reference that the school grades that we're talking about here, we are going from 21-22, which did include learning gains, where grades were assigned, to 22-23, and I showed you that model earlier that did not include learning gains. Slide 8 included, so included in the schools that made improvements were our 3 schools that had previously earned a D and were Bureau of School Improvement schools. All 3 of the identified schools, G. Weaver Hips, Manatee Elementary, and Fort Myers Middle Academy, improved their school grade, their percent of points, to a C in the 2022-23 school year, based on the new category thresholds for informational baseline grades. The slide references the total percent of points earned in each school year along with the school grade. Again, due to the absence of learning gain categories in 22-23, schools earned approximately the same total percent of possible points with an increased school grade based on the thresholds put into place for those informational grades. As a district, we received an overall grade of a B, and on this slide, you're presented with the 10 largest Florida districts as well as our neighboring districts. District overall percent of points was also affected due to the absence of learning gain categories in 22-23 informational baseline grades, and thresholds were adjusted to reflect the reduced categories. District thresholds are 58 to 67% to earn a B, 68% of points and above result in an A. The former threshold for an A was 62% of points and above. Our next portion will bring us to an update on the progress regarding the strategic priority to prepare all students for life after graduation. I will reference updates we have received and are awaiting in regards to the key performance indicators. Objective 1 is to increase the percent of all students who are achieving in all academic subject areas across all student groups. The data you will be presented with on the current and following slides utilizes targets formed from the retrofitted Progress Monitoring 3 scores from 2023 and the Progress Monitoring 1 and 2 data that's been collected this school year. The raw baseline data presented within the district scorecard was determined in June 2023 from the provisional results based on student spring assessments. The official baseline data shown today are the results provided with the informational baseline grades released from December of 2023. It's important to note that the raw baseline results included all students who received a score on any of the individual assessments, whereas the informational baseline district data is limited to students who are full year enrolled in the district. This means that students who were not full year enrolled at an individual school, but who were full year enrolled within the district would be included in our district grade calculations. At this time, we've not received any additional reports from the Florida Department of Education with individual assessment results to report official baselines in some cases. The targets provided were determined by academic services based on an analysis of student results in the spring of 2023, and targets may be adjusted once any additional reports are provided by the Florida Department of Education Accountability Department. Due to the transition in assessments and score reporting, many of the reports provided from the Department of Education were only provided on the provisional score reporting that was based on the previous Florida standardized assessments. As stated on the previous slide, reports of subgroup data have not yet been released. As reports become available, information on our scorecard will be updated to the official baseline, and targets will be updated based on those results. The Department of Education provided districts individual student results from spring 2023 and fall 2023 progress monitoring who were originally scored on the previous FSA scale as a retrofit to the new scale scores and cut scores that were approved in October 2023 by the Florida State Board of Education. What this allows us to do is monitor our students' progress on an equal scale. It would not allow us an equivalent measure to analyze progress monitoring from Progress Monitoring 1 in 2022 to the Progress Monitoring 1 in 2023 because they are on different scale scores. Therefore, today we will move forward knowing our results that have been provided from spring 2023 are on the new cut scores and our current year progress monitoring, so all results are based on the same cut scores and achievement levels. Another important note I should give is that the progress monitoring for English language arts and mathematics are providing a score based on an entire year's curriculum, not just where they should be at this point. Provided for you on this slide is a visual of Key Performance Indicator 1.1, specifically targeting English language arts. Progress Monitoring 2 is preliminary as they are currently in the assessment window through January 26th. Grades 3 through 5 began Progress Monitoring 2 upon our return from winter break, and grades 6 through 10 have until the last day of the window, which is the 26th this Friday, to assess any makeups missed prior to that winter break. We will begin our progress monitoring update with English language arts, and all levels are showing progress towards their target. The average change for all levels reported an increase of 4.8%. As we move into mathematics, raw baseline, official baseline, and targets are applied just as they were in English language arts. Our official baseline for all mathematics is reported based on our informational baseline district grade results. Mathematics progress will look different than other data points. Mathematics, while building on prior knowledge like other subjects, students are also being introduced to new concepts that they have never seen before. As stated previously, reports of subgroup data have not yet been released, and as information becomes available, our subgroups and targets will be updated. It is expected that mathematics looks low during PM1, and you will see increases throughout the year. This is due to the progress monitoring assessments, again covering a full year's worth of content while the students are still being introduced to new concepts. As the year progresses and instruction is provided on the new concepts, students should increase on the assessments covering them. Grade 3 through 8 are given the Florida Assessment of Student Thinking FAST progress monitoring, while BEST assessments that are not part of the FAST progress monitoring program include algebra and geometry. They utilize STAR math assessment for their progress monitoring. I should also point out that 7th grade math will look a little lower than other assessed grade levels and subjects within the middle school math progression. Grade 7 is predominantly scheduled with level 1 and 2 due to our middle school math progression. Overall, the data received so far shows increased achievement in all grade levels and subjects, with the exception right now of geometry. As we continue to move forward with our key performance indicators, we move on to science achievement. In 2023, science assessments did not change. The official baseline overall results seen here were provided through the informational baseline district grade, and individual results were identified directly from the Florida Department of Education accountability results. While final assessment reports were provided, a report breaking down the subgroup categories for individual subjects and assessments has not been made available by the Department of Education. This, again, as those official baselines become available, we will update the targets and information on this scorecard. Science progress monitoring is completed through a district-created quarterly benchmark assessment. Grade 8 and biology are seeing increases towards their target in 23-24. Due to science assessments being created by the district, we are able to offer a comparison to progress monitoring results from 2023. And both grade 8 and biology are on average 2% higher than the cohort of student results in PM2 during the 22-23 school year. Grade 5 is still ongoing now. Just as with science, in 2023, social studies assessments did not see a change. The official baseline overall results seen here were provided through the informational baseline district grade, and individual assessment results were identified directly from the Florida Department of Education accountability website. While final assessment reports were provided, a report breaking down the subgroup categories for individual subjects and assessments has not been made available, and for subgroup categories in social studies, once information does become available, results and targets will be updated on the scorecard also. Social studies progress monitoring is also done through the district-created quarterly benchmark assessments. And while we are seeing an increase from progress monitoring 1 for both subject areas, they both are below the progress monitoring results for the cohort of students who took PM2 last year in civics and U.S. history. Dr. Cupid-McCoy.
As a reminder, multiple data points are captured throughout the year, and Ms. Marks has shared a few. However, in isolation, the data is insufficient to impact student outcomes positively. So responding to the data is a really critical step. Examples of reacting to the data can include how a teacher changes his or her instructional approach, the adjustments he or she makes for each student within small group instruction, and the fidelity with which he or she adheres to teaching the benchmarks. Slide 22 reorients you to the academic timeline shared earlier this year during the presentation of the academic initiatives. We are currently looking at the bottom left portion of the timeline. And today, just as a point of reference, our K-2 data chats began. During our data chats, this is an opportunity for our school leaders to examine students' progress related to the foundations of reading while simultaneously addressing instruction of the K-2 benchmarks. When we look at our strategic plan objectives and the performance indicators, we must examine how each student progresses in order for us to achieve our outcomes. 3rd through 5th grade data chats will begin next week, and here too, the focus will be on individualized attention. Ms. Marks has mentioned that PM2 data for grades 3 through 5 were noticeably absent for ELA and mathematics. Again, our students are currently in that assessment window, and as soon as that data is available, information will be updated. When you take a look at the timeline on slide 22, it references that right about this point, we should be engaging in our data chats, which we are. We have exemplar data, and we should also be engaged in our progress monitoring 2 activities, which we are. It is important to note that data triangulation is a critical step for us in determining what adjustments are needed in our instructional cycle. It's insufficient for us to take a singular data point and make determinations around that. So the triangulation of different data points is vitally important to us. So how are we reacting to the data? When you think about how a school and the leadership team reacts, keep in mind that this is an ongoing process, and it happens beyond simply looking at the exemplar data or simply looking at PM2 results. As teachers plan their instructions, which are focused on the benchmarks, during this cycle, teachers will interweave conversations during their professional learning communities, often called PLCs, around what exactly needs to be done for a student. What is the data saying? What does it mean? The numbers actually mean something. And so you engage in deep conversation about what that means as a whole and what that means for the individual child. Additionally, principals engage with grade level teams. They engage in data chats. Again, they talk about how is Jennifer progressing? What are her strengths? What are her areas of growth? And what specifically needs to be done to allow her to be successful? In addition to principals having data chats with teachers at the school level, central office administrators, we engage in data dialogues with our school principals. Again, it's important to note that reacting to the data is necessary to affect change. And sometimes those conversations are really difficult. They are uncomfortable, but they are necessary because we need to change practices and or some behaviors. Coaching, modeling, those are just a few examples of how we can react to the data so that effective instructional practices can be modeled for teachers who may need them. When we take a look at our PM2 data in the exemplars, we cannot be satisfied with the progress to date. We must continually delve into what it means. We must continually determine what are the next steps, and those next steps must be really viable. I'm going to deviate a minute from our presentation. Dr. Bernier mentioned we had some hot off the press information yesterday. So Ms. Marks, I'm going to ask you to just pull up a summary for us for a minute.
Okay.
Dr. Cuban-McCoy, before you begin, board members, prior to the meeting, this is one of those items that I said we would add. I provided you a copy of this. You'll see the same information that Ms. Marks is presenting and Dr. Cuban-McCoy is speaking of into the public. We will get this uploaded into board docs as soon as the presentation is complete.
So I would like to take this opportunity to thank high school leaders specifically at this moment. We had an interesting year together. We pushed, we supported, we held hands, we pushed, and we are grateful that we've done that, and we will continue to do that for our students. So I'd like to orient you to slide 2, the far right column that looks at the change percentage. As we look at the performance from the 21-22 school year and the 22-23 school year as it relates to our subgroups. This is one of our KPIs in our strategic plan, improving the graduation performance of all of our subgroups. And as you look down the right column, you can see the improvements, most notably a 6.7% increase for our students with disabilities and a 7.2% increase for our English language learners. Tremendous growth. We do recognize that we have to take a much deeper look at any percentage that is an outlier, typically 1 or 2 percentage points. That's about average growth or decline. So we're definitely interested in revisiting the specific work that was done to support our students with disabilities and our English language learners so that we can apply those strategies across the board. The third page shows that our graduation rate for the 22-23 school year grew to 85.1%. Again, now I'd like to thank the elementary and middle school principals who over the years have contributed to the growth of our students. We often think of graduation as a high school event. However, we must keep in mind that it actually begins in pre-K. And so each of those levels have played a role in getting our students to where they are. So I'd like to publicly thank you at this time for your contributions. We are pleased with the movement, the upward trajectory. However, we do expect to continue to grow. Ideally, we want 100% of our students being prepared to go into the workforce. On slide 4, the far right column identifies the change percentages. There's some areas where there were slight declines and other areas of growth, and this is as it relates to each of our individual schools. Slide 5, similarly, the change here represents our special centers and charter schools, and again, we have celebrations in our change column, most notably 7.6% for Donna J. Beasley. And then I'd like to just briefly reference slide 6. This covers the Big Ten districts and our 2 neighboring districts. We're pleased to show that our change percentage here is 2.6%, and as you have some time to look at this a little later on, as it relates to the Big Ten and our 2 neighboring districts, this is an area of pride for us in this moment. We recognize that we cannot and will not rest on our laurels, but it is a moment for us to celebrate our students, their parents, the staff at our respective schools who've just done some tremendous work to get us to this level.
Thank you, Dr. Cupid-McCoy. I want to make sure you had everything done. Now we're going to react a little bit to that data. And as Dr. Cupid-McCoy said, graduation doesn't start your senior year. It truly starts in pre-K. And we're going to talk to you a little bit about some of the initiatives that Dr. Cupid-McCoy and I spoke about earlier when we went over our academic initiatives. So how are we starting these initiatives early, and what are we doing? As a reminder, we have been working with a vendor called Public Consulting Group, PCG, and they have been auditing our K-2 curriculum and assessments. And we have done that through a heavy teacher voice. So we have had focus groups where teachers have been invited to come in face-to-face and give feedback on the K-2 curriculum and assessments. Similarly, our administrators have also had the opportunity to come in face-to-face and provide feedback. We also have sent a survey to all of our K-2 teachers for those that couldn't come in face-to-face for those focus groups so that they could provide feedback. And based on that feedback and in partnership with PCG, we've begun to rewrite some of our curriculum. And we're at the point now where we are rewriting our first unit. And a unit is about 20 days worth of instructional, daily instructional for 20 days. And so the rewrite process now will also include teacher voice once again. Every school this week is submitting a representative from their K-1 and 2 grade levels to come to the district and help provide feedback on the first unit of instruction, and teachers will get paid for that work. After they provide that feedback, then PCG will continue to rewrite that first unit, and we will then send that first unit out to all teachers in the district, K-2. They will then get an opportunity to read that first unit of instruction, provide feedback, come back once again and provide additional opportunities for PCG to work with our district team and rewrite that first unit of instruction. And that will continue all the way through as we continue to rewrite every 20 days this unit of instruction focused in on the science of reading as well. And so when we talk about the science of reading, we have begun that training. We talked to you about that previously. All K-1 and 2 teachers are getting access to our science of reading through the University of Florida, the Lastinger Center, and they're focused in on what they call Flamingo small group instruction. And how do you really enhance that small group instruction? So our K-1 and 2 teachers are getting that professional development, as well as all of our elementary principals, all of our elementary assistant principals, and our secondary administrators that oversee the area of reading. In secondary, that might be a principal, and that might be an assistant principal. So all those groups of individuals are currently engaged in the Flamingo small group training. Our teachers are going to get 12 hours of professional learning in the science of reading. Our reading coaches will get 30 hours in this area, and our administrators are getting 10 hours in the area of the science of reading. And so that is for long-term investment as we continue to focus in on proficiency of students earning a level 3 or higher and reading by 3rd grade. So those are some of the early stages that we're hopeful that they will continue to contribute to the increase in our graduation rate. Currently, what's happening in the area of high school with our high school graduation rate, Dr. Cupid McCoy talked to you about our graduation data chats, and last year we began our first real intense high school graduation data chats with our high school principals, where we looked at every individual student that was a senior. And we did that quarterly, working through making sure those seniors had met their graduation requirements, those that didn't, what was happening at the school to make sure that they had those interventions. That was last year. Rolling into the summer for this upcoming year, we had graduation data chats during the summer before the school year began so that our high school principals could talk to us about where's your senior class, what are we doing with your students? And we talked about individual students and cohorts of students. We then had another graduation data chat in November for an update, and next week will be our 3rd high school graduation data chat with our high school principals talking about those seniors. But this year, we've also have had an increase in our focus on our freshmen as well, our 9th graders. And Dr. Cupid McCoy, myself, Clayton Simmons, Candace Oliveto, we have been looking at the research around 9th grade interventions, and we've been looking at large districts across the United States that have had some success in this area, and we're trying to ascertain aspects of what they have done to see if some of that is replicable here at the school district of Lee County. So we are focused in on 9th grade interventions as well as our seniors. When Dr. Cupid McCoy and I spoke to you previously about our academic initiatives, we talked to you about interventions that would take place at every interim and then the quarter for our 9th graders. And some of the interventions we talked about, for example, up on the screen is your Connect with Lee logo. Remember, that is a one-on-one tutoring session with content experts, which are really our teachers that provide that content experts. We also have expanded the opportunity for ACT and SAT prep for our students this year. We're providing, using that Connect with Lead model, we are providing an opportunity for students to participate virtually from 3:30 to 5:30 or 5:30 to 7:30 in the evening on SAT and ACT prep. We also have Saturday face-to-face sessions where students will come in from 8:30 to 12:30 and get intense SAT and ACT prep as well. We're doing that February 3rd, March 2nd, April 6th, and April 27th. And also remember, we have Back on Track. Back on Track is a tool that we use to allow students to make up credits through credit recovery. Most of our high schools offer that well into the evening until 9:30 at night. Some of them offer it on the weekends as well, so finding various different avenues to provide interventions for our 9th grade students. We will be honest and transparent with you that our 9th grade interventions is a work in progress. It is not perfect right now. We are continuing to fine-tune those systems as we continue to deepen our knowledge in the area of research around 9th grade interventions. Another key component, and I would point to some of the success that we had this past year with our graduation rate, is we have a district graduation team that is hyper-focused on the validity of the graduation data. I have two individuals that are sitting here in the audience today. I have Candace Olivedo, our Director of High School Curriculum, and Christina Morgan, she's our Graduation Coordinator. The two of them daily would go into our graduation data tracker and would look at the data. Are students coded properly? Are they in the right cohort? When we look at the state assessments, they would then go back and look at the student's schedule and see, is the student scheduled in the right courses to make sure that they can meet that graduation requirement? A district safety net is what that has provided. And I don't use this word loosely, but those two have been dogmatic in their approach to making sure that they're providing support to schools in relation to the data. What does that support look like? It looks like monthly face-to-face and Teams meetings with our charter school partners and also our traditional schools. And our traditional schools, that includes your assistant principal for curriculum, your lead school counselor, and your information specialist who enters that data at the school level as well. Hence the importance of making sure that information is entered correctly and the verification from our district graduation team. This team is also working on the creation of a 9th grade intervention team. That's going to be an iteration that we have a 9th grade intervention team. Part of our key learnings at the research that we've been reading. So as we continue to deepen our knowledge in this area, we will continue to fine-tune our systems. And we really believe the graduation data chats that we had last year and the focus this year, but also on the 9th grade level, will pay dividends. And one of the things we talk about all the time, Dr. Cupid McCoy and I, we always said if we ever went back to a high school and we're high school principals again, our focus in 9th grade would look vastly different based around the knowledge that we have in this area and the support that we need to be providing our freshmen. So that's a little bit of our reactions to that graduation data. Thank you.
Thank you. On slide 28, that brings us to objective 3, and that's to increase college and career acceleration pathway participation and performance across all student groups, and brings us to key performance indicator 3.1 to increase the percent of students graduating with at least one college and career acceleration credit. This goes along with what Dr. Schuyler was just speaking of. The graduation tracker and the work that we're doing will tie into these results as they continue. With graduation cohort data, college and career acceleration is reported with school and district grades as lag data, meaning once the school year has finished for the graduating cohort, final grades and assessments are received.
Ms. Marks, I hate to interrupt you. Can you make sure that your button's down? It's okay.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'll start over. Objective 3 is to increase college and career acceleration, pathway participation, and performance across all student groups, and brings us to key performance indicator 3.1 to increase the percent of students graduating with at least one college and career acceleration credit. I noted that the graduation work that we are doing with the grad tracker and with having our coordinator and with Ms. Aliveto and the high school principals, that work is playing into the data that we are seeing with college and career acceleration also. Just as with graduation cohort data, college and career acceleration is reported with school and district grades as lag data, meaning once the school year has finished for that graduation cohort, final grades and assessments are received, final college and career acceleration is derived from the data submitted within the graduation cohort review that we do. And it's prepared for verification from the Florida Department of Education. Our raw baseline was reported as a result for the 2021 graduating class, and that was 63.8%. The current target showing was determined based on that raw baseline. As information becomes available from the 2022-23 graduation cohort, results and targets on this information will be updated. Just as with the other subgroup categories, updated information on subgroups for college and career acceleration has not been released. And as soon as information becomes available, results and targets will be updated. Calculating the college and career acceleration means a student in the graduating cohort has met one of the following: a score making them eligible to earn college credit through College Board Advanced or AP examinations, International Baccalaureate IB examinations, or ACE International Certificate of Education ACE examinations. Earning a grade of C or higher for college credit through dual enrollment courses, or beginning with the 2021 calculation of school grades through the completion of 300 or 300 or more clock hours through career dual enrollment courses. Career and professional education CAPE industry certifications, or a CAPE acceleration industry certification identified in the industry certification funding list. And beginning in the 22-23 calculation of school grades, an armed services qualification test score that falls within category 2 or higher, a score of 65 or higher on a score of 1 to 99 on the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery ASVAB. And at least 2 credits in a Junior Reserve Officers Training Corps course from the same branch of the United States Armed Forces, as identified in the course code directory and instructional personnel assignments adopted by Rule 6A-109441. And provided here on the screen is a historical look over the 5 years prior to 22-23 of our college and career acceleration results for our school district. We already talked about these.
So our strategic priority, preparing all students for life after graduation, is a major focus for us. Objective 2 in the strategic plan sets the expectation to increase the graduation rate across all student groups, while Objective 3 is to increase college and career acceleration pathways participation across all student groups. Therefore, it is critically important that we pay attention to detail. And this is also done in our data chats with our secondary principals. So, for example, the expectation has been conveyed and continues to be monitored that all 9th grade students are enrolled in at least one CTE course. When it's not possible, based on a student's required course load, the students are then scheduled during their 10th grade year. Currently, a majority of our 9th grade students are enrolled in Market and Essentials. We also have a group of students who are working to acquire micro-credentialing in an area of CTE interest to them. When we look at increasing our pathways, awareness is vitally important, and that awareness occurs before our students enter high school. We're currently exploring the expansion of CTE offerings in middle school that can lead to a direct pathway in high school. So for example, if we have a high school with an ag program, let's look at middle schools that are aligned in that area, and what could the middle schools potentially offer that may provide a direct path to the high school. Where are we getting this information from? We're getting input from our school-based and our district-based career advisory boards to help us determine what are some of those appropriate CTE offerings.
Thank you. So in reactions to the data, you've heard about a lot of the initiatives that we're working on. We also wanted to highlight for you, just to mention, not go in depth with that today, but there are a number of new dashboards that Joy Marks and her team have been providing schools. One is our new elementary literacy, where we look at the information from Dibbles and really great reading, and it really helps to fine-tune the components of reading to help our elementary teachers know what students' strengths are in the area of reading and additional areas of focus. We have a forecasting tool that provides school leaders an opportunity to look at students' prior scores, where they are currently, and then forecast and predict how they believe they will end on a particular course. And that's a new accountability dashboard that Ms. Marks has provided. And then we've talked about the graduation data tracker, and that continues to iterate as we continue to deepen that work. Dr. Cuban-McCoy talked to you at length about all the various data chats that are happening. K-2 data chats that have begun today are new, and those are led by our assistant principals in the schools. They're the ones that are taking ownership for that K-1 and 2. So our principal supervisors for elementary, our director of curriculum and their team, they're out at schools now having those K-2 data chats. And then we will begin our traditional ones with high school and 3 through 12. We'll begin those next week also. And then finally, I mentioned earlier, we are having our graduation data chats, our third one of the year, as we continue to have a hyper focus in that area. So those are our current next steps.
In September of 2023, we shared that schools receive content area support on a tiered system based on need. The overall school letter grade is not the only factor that determines tiering. Student group performance within a specific content is also a factor. So for example, if a school has a school letter grade of B, however, a significant portion of students underperform in mathematics, then we provide content support in mathematics in that particular school, even though the overall school rating is a B. So that is really what is meant by content tiering support. Why do we do that? We do have limited personnel, limited resources, so it's important that we are strategic with how we use the personnel that we have. Tiering based on content allows us to do that. It allows the individual from the central office to leverage their skill set and better support schools. What we want to ensure is that when we have successes, they're not occurring by happenstance. We want to ensure that we know what steps we took that led to the successes. They are identifiable, they can be replicated, because this is what will allow us to be sustainable over time. Quick wins are important, but sustainability is what we're striving for. And so to us, in academic services, as it is for our superintendent, as it is for you, the board, it is important that every student receives benchmark-aligned, high-quality instruction daily. We have to do that in order to increase proficiency and on-time graduation, and we definitely have to do that if we want our students to be successful post-secondary. So we interact with the data, we respond to the data. It's a cyclical process. This concludes our presentation, and we await the superintendent's comments and school board discussion.
My comments will be very brief. First of all, thank you to the team for a very comprehensive presentation. To the board, I know this is kind of a presentation of a tale of two cities. One is a set of expectations that the state held on to moving into this year in graduation rate. Being able to see what our overall graduation rate is, being able to break it down by school, be able to break it down by all student groups. That is the expectation of this presentation in all of the areas, reading, writing, and math. But as you heard from Ms. Marks today, that data just isn't available. So you got to get ready for Curriculum Services 2.0, because when that data becomes available, we'll be back with the strategic charts in order to do that. But I will use graduation rate as an opportunity to talk about just do, plan, check, act, and just the continuous improvement cycle. And I will begin the same way Dr. Cupid-McCoy did. And I want to thank our high school principals. They dug in on this issue, and they really worked very hard. And she talks about a lot of coaching. There was a lot of other moments that could be described as moments other than coaching, but the hard work paid off. And last night, sitting at a computer in my home office, about 8 o'clock at night, typing a message to the high school principals, thanking them for their effort and their hard work, was one of the nicest emails I've ever been able to put together. Because to move our graduation rate from where it was to where it is shows that the hard work that those principals and their staff are doing is on the right track to continue a trajectory of continuous improvement. I will name them by name. Christina Morgan, Candace Alivedo, Joy Marks, thank you. Because your additional eyes and ears and phone calls and meetings related to helping our principals stay on track with this data, and your support to them to help them understand the questions and move forward, I want to respond and say thank you to you as well as Clayton Simmons. So I really, there's much to be thankful for in the school district of Lee County, and as we move towards world class or a system of excellence, we're not there yet, but we clearly know the pathway, and we're setting up the pathways and the processes in order to get there. And it's this team, the people they represent, it's the high school principals that should fill this room, it's our K through 8 system that helps support beginning in pre-K all the way through 8th grade to deliver someone to the freshman door, and then how do we help them make the shift? I will share with you, you're about to get a little bit of a homework assignment. It is not compensatory, but I did buy the book called The Make or Break Year for each one of you. It's a story of the history of a particular urban system in the United States that specifically took on the issue of freshmen. And you would think that freshmen with high test scores are immune to not being graduates. That is not true. If a freshman doesn't make a connection very quickly within their high school, they're just as at risk for not graduating as a student with poor test scores. So the work that this team's doing, and more importantly, the work that's being done at our schools is paying off, and the graduation is one area. We look forward to bringing the other data back to you related to the other areas, reading, writing, math, and to the public. We'd have it if the state would give it to us. We just don't have it yet. So I look forward to your discussion about it and questions to the team.
Thank you, Dr. Bernier. Mr. Persons.
Great presentation. I see how this really helps the administration, all the way down to the individual teachers, all the information, the progress monitoring. My question is, I didn't hear one thing mentioned about parents anywhere in this as far as, are they able to get any of this data? For instance, if I had a 3rd grader and the PM1 comes out for the class or for the school, can I find out my individual students? Where are they? Because that might inspire me to get more help, to help my student type thing. So I just didn't hear it mentioned. I'm not saying it's not there. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, the Florida Department of Education, if a student is taking their FAST, ELA, or math assessment, we do work with our application services team, and when a parent logs into their Focus portal, and we'll talk about that during Parent University this week, that they are able to link directly to the Florida Department of Education's results, which gives them a detailed report on their students' progress monitoring, final scores, and information.
Ms. Jordan.
I just want to say thank you. This was a lot of information. It was a great presentation. And I also want to say thank you to the superintendent as well, because I know you all thank the principals, everyone, which of course we really do need to thank them. This is the first time I've ever seen a war room in this district as we've seen with you here, which combined every single school. So eyes were always on the school. So it was a joint effort of everyone that made this happen. So I really do appreciate it. But I do have a question with the objective 1, when we put these targets, the performance targets, where do we get this? Because it looks like if we are looking at the expectations of our children and wanting them to really achieve everything, and then we have when you're looking at the subgroups, the expectation is different depending upon the subgroup. How does that, how do we arrive to
Joy,
that?
if you could permit, let's go to slide 12, which I think the original part of the question is about PM data and how those targets are set.
Yes, I know 17 had the one that showed.
We can look at the actual scorecard and talk about those targets. Slide 12. So there's two targets in question here that I think both behoove explanation. One is, how does the target come about? And then I'll share with the board, let's take 6th grade. Joy's going to help us with the 47%. When the students first took the test in PM1 very early in the fall, the 6th grade students scored 39% against those PM objectives. But remember, they were being tested on 6th grade language arts for the entire year, things they haven't even been taught yet.
Right.
So you would expect, as more and more instruction happens and more the curriculum is laid out to them, we'd continue to improve. That's one target that I think needs to be explained, and then we can go to a scorecard and explain the other target.
Page 17.
Right.
Okay,
We'll go to
thank you.
17 next.
Thank
Can you explain for the board how that target is developed?
Yes. Through some data analysis of the students that took the 6th grade assessment in the prior year, it's looked at to see how many students scored in each achievement level. Within each achievement level, what was the district average for that achievement level? What was the top average, the lowest average? And then what is the state average? And from those multiple pieces of data, we can look and see what should be the expectation for a student that took the assessment last year and had a prior level 3. We can then relate that to our students coming in to the 6th grade ELA course this year and say, okay, based on these multiple data points, we understand where the highest quartile of our prior level 3s scored, the lowest quartile, and then the averages. So it's really a data analysis of how the students performed on the prior year.
So then you can go to page 17. I think it's important to add just to that those numbers and targets will continue to rise as ultimate student performance also increases. So when we take PM3 and students move from being 45% proficient to 50% proficient, the targets will also move up for them for what's expected of a 6th grade group. So that, and then specifically, can we talk about the baselines and the targets, and then the 4-year performance targets of the strategic plan?
Yes, I'm going to pop back on 1, 2, we are on science here.
Yes.
So the official baseline that we show here is what was reported on our district school grade results. So out of the composition, and I spoke to, those are students that were with us for full year. Grade 5, 8, and high school biology, their official baseline, those were from the results that we received for all the students that took those assessments last year, and those were the official reports put out by the Florida Department of Education. From there, same concept, looking at how did the students that took the 5th grade science assessment perform the year before, looking at the district average, the top quartile, the lowest quartile, and determining a target goal for them, for that new cohort of students that's coming into that assessment.
So we have 50% as an official baseline data going into this year for 23-24. Our target goal for fifth grade assessments in this particular area, sorry, in ELA and math science, this is specifically which?
This is science.
Science.
Yes, sir.
So in that fifth grade, the state report card for 22-23 told us we were at 50% of our fifth graders were scoring proficiently. We now moved it to 53, and in 23-24, this year, when we get our results sometime in this summer, because we're back to a normal reporting cycle, we'll be able to report whether we met that 53% goal or exceeded it.
I guess I'm not, okay, 17, when you look at the subgroups, the breakup of the children by race, we're expecting, our expectation are higher for some races and lower for some, when I'm looking at this.
Again, yes.
So that's why I'm trying to understand this.
Again, looking at it, yes, I could see where you would see that, but go back to Ms. Mark's explanation of how those baselines and targets are received. What we do is we look at students in particular, we look at all of their test data and all the quartiles, and through the same formula that sets those targets for PM monitoring and sets it for other students, we continue to set a reachable benchmark to show sustainable growth. I think Dr. McCoy said it beautifully that while we'd like to see a huge jump, we understand that the systemic aspect of continuous improvement and continuing to move the needle. We have an expectation that all students can learn. So we proved that within the graduation data. When you look at all student groups, I know the state still uses subgroups. You'll see me avoid that term pretty regular, but the state still uses that as an official term. When you look at all student groups in graduation, for instance, we have some real celebrations, including the number of ESE and the number of ELL students that are crossing the stage. So right now, historically, these groups of students have underperformed. This is a target goal which we think we can reach, but we would love to exceed it.
Thank you.
Mr. Fisher?
Thank you. First off, kudos to Dr. Bernier, Dr. Cupid McCoy, Dr. Spiro, Director Marks, everyone in this district. I truly appreciate the hard work and will celebrate the victories. However, I have some questions and comments because that's part of my job here. So when I'm talking about this, remember that light when I'm asking. Can we go to slide 7, please? Okay, So I'm looking at high school, and in this one, and again, congratulations on what's been done with high schools and graduation rates and many of the other rates. I do have a concern about the schools decreasing outcome. High school is our only one that, if you look at, we had no improvement. Again, the data is not complete, so I know we're going to hear that, but I do have some concerns that, you know, we had 2 of the high schools out of them have decreased letter grade. Are we going to get any further update on the schools with incomplete in the future?
Yes, sir. We had a deadline of a week ago, 2 weeks ago, to submit letters to the state. Dr. Marks, along with the academic services team, have applied for all of our schools in the incomplete category. Some of our schools that are only 1 point away from an A or a B or even a C. We've looked at all the different avenues with which to appeal. I called personally the commissioner and Senior Chancellor Burns to let them know our applications were forthcoming and asked for their due consideration for all of those. So we will be hearing about those appeals. We've already submitted the appeals to have all those grades re-examined, including our 3 schools who got an incomplete.
Okay, I appreciate that. Again, as I said, I know the grades from the state don't mean everything, but I'm a little concerned by that with the 2 letter grades going down and compared to the elementary and middle on that. Can we go to slide 10, please? And just to clarify this, the raw baseline in ELA, where is that based on? Can you just, I know we went through this with science, and just to make sure to clarify for that,
Yes.
for me.
The raw baseline that's shown on slide 10 for ELA are the results that we received with provisional grades during spring of 2023.
Okay, is that PM3?
PM3,
Yeah,
yes.
that's what I was, okay, I just wanted to, okay.
Can I go one step?
Yes, sir.
If I may, sir, can I go one step further in clarifying? And Joy, keep an eye on me. And when she talks about raw baseline, that includes all student results. When the state grades a school or fills in the next column of official baseline, they look with a different lens and a different set of criteria. They look for students who have been present both in October and February FTE. They look for the amount of time a student's been enrolled. There's additional selection criteria to align the official baseline to the students that we are most likely to have had the most impact with because of their time in our system. The raw baseline could include a student who showed up the day before the test was given. They could be extraordinarily brilliant. In our baseline, we got that score. In the raw data, in the official baseline, that data will be eliminated from our results because it will be based upon the students effectually that we had for the entire year.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, thank you. Can we move on to slide 12, please? ELA PM1 data and 2. Again, a little bit of concern, and I'm not trying to pick just on high schools for this one, I hope we know that. So grade 10 worries me, the increase from PM1 to PM2. Do we have any idea why we think that's such a little gain at this point? Yeah, I don't have to have the answer now, if we can maybe follow up on that.
I think I don't, as a data end result person, I think I would like to confer with our curriculum team and get a better idea of the results that we're seeing there.
Of course, it's just something I noted. Can we also go to slide 15, and Chair Langford Fleming, if I go too long, please cut me off.
Thank you.
For math. So please remind my recollection on this. For algebra, where is that coming from? Which test again?
Algebra is the Algebra 1 exam that our middle schoolers are taking, as well as our high schoolers. And the results that you see here are all Lee County students combined in.
Okay. Again, I have a concern, obviously, from PM1 on algebra to PM2. Obviously, that's something, algebra has definitely been something that's been discussed a lot recently. So I don't know if maybe we can, again, if you could come back with a little bit more information on that one, because that's one that, again, concerns me as well. So
do a deeper breakdown, yes, sir.
Okay, and I think another one, can we go to the big, I believe it's the Big 10 district, so that would be slide 9. So I had asked for this, but, and I'll mention the board, if we could get the data on the prior years in comparison for the districts, go back 5 years on that. I just want to see where we're comparison with Lee and the other districts to see. I know 2 of those years, and I'd requested some of that in the email. I know 2 of it was not reported, so I just kind of want to get a better idea on that if we could get that. So again, as I said, I want to thank you, Dr. Spiro, talking about the interventions. I'm excited to hear about that, and I know as I'm asking some questions, as I said, because it's important. So I appreciate everyone, but we do talk about up here about accountability and transparency, and this is our #1 job for this entire district. So I don't want you to think I'm poo-pooing you guys, but this is what we're here to do, and I'm happy with the progress, but I'm not content where we're at. We have quite a ways to go, and I know everyone in this room and thinks that, and I especially, you know, what you said, Dr. Cupid McCoy, and I always appreciate our conversations. You talking about, you know, not being satisfied with it and sustainability, and I know you truly mean that, and that means a lot to me. So when I'm talking about these things, that's what I'm looking at. As I said, this is, you know, we're still not there. As I said, I have concerns just, as I said, looking across versus us versus other districts. I know we're making progress, but we have a ways to go. So, and that doesn't take away from anyone's hard work in here. Dr. Bernier, I think you've done a fantastic job. I hope you know that. So, but it's also, as I said, this is what our #1 job is up here. So it's on all of us, including this board. So I want to make sure we're re-emphasizing that and really looking at things. So, but again, thank you everyone, and that's all the questions I have at the moment.
Ms. Morgan.
So this is kind of like going from 0 to 60 in 18 months. It's really overwhelming, and I really haven't had a chance to look at it, but I do want to thank you. And my confidence comes from the fact that we are doing exactly what we need to do. We can go right down to the student level, and we can determine what it is we need to do to support individual students to achieve our long-term goals. And I accept that this is a baby steps thing. We're not going to see things transform overnight, but what we will see is things transform over time in a sustainable way. And so I just want to say thank you. I am confident that every year we will increase the ability of our students to be successful and that we are on the right path. That's really all I can say at this point. I might come in with some more questions at a later time, but thank you very, very much.
At this time, I'm going to ask if Ms. Patrica is still online. Do you have any comments or questions?
I sure do. Thank you so much. You don't have to go through the slides as I call them out because my questions are more general, but I'm using these as the notes that I took. Slide 4, there was some discussion about learning gains. And frankly, I was a little bit surprised to hear that. Perhaps my recollection is failing me, but if I may through the chair to Dr. Bernier, weren't we disregarding, not completely disregarding, but putting less focus on learning gains as a district?
Yes, I think what you heard specifically in the accountability model for 22-23 is because we are administrating a new test, you cannot go back and compare the results of this year to the previous test and create a learning gain. So the state removed learning gains from the calculation of school grades. The other piece to your question is, yes, we are having more of a conversation around reaching for proficiency, to Mr. Fisher's point of while we're making progress, we still have a long way to go for our students to be reaching proficiency. Because we believe when you shoot for proficiency, then you will find learning gains in the process, versus if you just look for a gain, you may not get a student to proficiency.
All right, good. Thank you. I'm really glad that you repeated that. And it is still something the state is looking at, but we as a district have shifted away from that. I just felt that should be repeated as we were going through this data. Let me step back for a second and say to Director Marks, I'm not sure that we've had a presentation from you before, and if we have, it certainly has not been this lengthy. And I think it was a really good call by Dr. Bernier and Dr. Cupid-McCoy and Dr. Spiro to put you in front of the board, because I have much more faith and confidence in this data and what it means for our kids, because you just explained it to us. So kudos to you. Obviously, kudos to Dr. Spiro and Dr. Cupid-McCoy as well. Thank you for all that you're doing for our kids.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Just wanted to say thank you. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Going back to slide 12, again, you don't have to go to it. The question I have is, if I recall correctly, at this time last year, those numbers were far more dire than they are this year. Do we attribute that to the fact that we have a real baseline this year, or to the fact that Dr. Cupid-McCoy and her team, that their work has really taken hold? That's probably a question for Dr. Bernier through the chair.
Dr. Bernier.
It's a really good question. Yes, I believe that the work of the academic service team is beginning to take hold. Do we have everyone holding hands around a campfire and singing exactly the same song? I would be remiss if I said that was the truth. Just like when you heard the ELL presentation earlier this year from Ms. Sarmiento. Right? We're starting with the coalition of the willing, and as people see like a graduation improved by 9.7 points in the case of one of our high schools, somebody who's moving in the other direction is going to have questions about why theirs didn't. That's the opportunity to create those conversations and those meaningful opportunities where we can begin to adjust and get all of our schools moving in the same direction. But I don't want to take away from any one of the principals. They've worked very hard on this, and there are graduation classes and there are graduation classes. And to Dr. McCoy's point earlier, a 1% to 2% gain in either direction is to be expected because a graduation rate fluctuates based upon each individual class. However, you want to see the overall trend continue to move upward, and we're glad to see it get to where it is. And to Mr. Fisher's point, we have a lot longer way to go. Our graduation rate needs to be in the 90s. And we know that's the expectation of this board, and that's the expectation of being a world-class system.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Madam Chair. I only have a couple more, if I may continue. Slide 15, the question that came to mind there is, what is the purpose or the point of progress monitoring standards and material that has not yet been taught or introduced in the classroom? Why are we doing that?
I can watch my team, Ms. Patrica, begin to smile because they know that I'm going to ask them for their response related to that question.
Board Member Patrica, this is Cupid McCoy. That is not a decision point made by the school district of Lee County. The progress monitoring is designed and executed by the state and implemented by districts.
I can go one step forward and say that as a former school principal, knowing that if students, if I get by raw data from Progress Monitor 1 and I've got a student sitting in the 8th grade that has mastered 60% of the 8th grade standard, it gives me the opportunity as we drive down to the individual student level that maybe we missed a student who maybe didn't score well on the previous year's exam, and we now have an opportunity potentially to move a shift in their schedule into Algebra 1. I think the idea is to show the students and the teachers what's expected of a student at each grade level, and then to work over time to watch the percentage move in the appropriate jumps, movement from, for instance, 8th grade math, where I'm looking at the moment, moving from 15% in PM1 to 39%. But if I had a student way outside of that particular result, it would make me question what I would need to advance his or her work, or if I had a student way below, what sort of interventions I would need to put in place. So it's, I believe the concept behind this particular process of testing a student on an entire year of curriculum does give us the ability to think about differentiation.
That was a very gracious answer, Dr. Bernier. I'd like to present to the board the notion of perhaps working that into some kind of a legislative ask next year. In my estimation, as a parent and as a school board member, it's a tremendous waste of students and teachers' time to be tested on material that haven't been taught yet for the purpose of perhaps finding the 1 or 2 or 1% of outliers that have already mastered the material even though they haven't been taught it. So just that's sort of a philosophical thing for the board to think about, you know, as we head into our legislative platform for next year. Mr. Fisher, you hit most of my questions. Again, we shared a brain as we went through this data. I'm not going to repeat what you said. Graduation rates. Somebody said graduation rates do not start senior year. I will tell you that as a parent, I have seen a difference in the approach to graduation for my children this year as opposed to my child that graduated, I think she graduated 2 years ago. I can't remember now, but there are contracts coming home. The communication is far more frequent as to what the expectations are, what my children need to complete in order to be able to walk that stage in May. So, Mr. Persons, you mentioned something about parents and how much they were aware. I know you were talking about more the test scores, but I can attest that as a parent with children in high school, I have seen a change in the level of communication and the detail of that communication. My final question is, we talked about grade 9. We talked about the fact that we have schools that are getting our kids ready, K-8, to walk into the high school and be ready to learn and be ready to graduate in 4 years. have we thought about taking these changes that we're making back further than ninth grade? Are we starting to think about what can we do with eighth graders, seventh graders, sixth graders, all the way down to kindergarten?
Yes.
That's my final question. Thank you.
Yes, and I'll be brief. When you think about middle school acceleration, that is really what we're looking at. We're looking to find those individual students that don't necessarily have to be gifted and talented as the gifted standard exists, but a student who's gifted and talented in math or language arts or foreign language, how can we have them begin to explore high school curriculum, CTE courses and other things, so that when they arrive to the schoolhouse door as a freshman, they already know that they have room available in their junior and senior schedule to move into a calculus project of calculus AB and beyond, dual enroll for what some people are referring to in the state now as real college credit. When you get a college credit from FGCU or FSW, it does immediately transfer as that credit, not to be clept for another elective or something else. So yes, there is some work on middle school acceleration. In fact, I believe we have some people going, or we were invited to an opportunity in Akron, Ohio, specifically to look at what they're doing with middle school acceleration as part of our relationship with the Carnegie Institute.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll go ahead and share my comments. I'm not going to call the schools out, but if we were to go back to the graduation rates for traditional high schools, and we have this list that you provided that you inserted, I have 2 questions there and then some other comments. 2 schools land with a significant negative value, and I would like to dig in deeper there to find out why that's occurring. But then we have this amazing increase in Lee County virtual, which is wonderful. But do we know what that is attested to? I'm wondering, is it because so many students have gone virtual because the population has increased there? Maybe we could look into why that has occurred. I mean, that's wonderful for our Lee virtual students and our teachers in the virtual school. So those are 2 questions I had regarding that. I couldn't agree more with Chair Fisher, or Mr. Fisher, Chair Fisher, about how important it is that all the hard work that's being done behind the scenes, and I'm an incredibly competitive person, so I'm not satisfied with where we're landing here and know that we have growth, and I know you know that we have room for growth. A couple of things that just kind of popped out to me. When we are looking, and as a former educator myself, we always seem to focus on these subgroups, which are very important. And then we would focus on the subgroups of even maybe possibly the gifted or the AP. I would encourage you, staff, not to take your eye off the middle. Don't miss the middle chunk of kids. They're the ones that sort of fly under the radar. They don't ever raise their hand and ask for help, but they're also not the ones necessarily, you know, failing their tests either. So I would just encourage you not to take your eye off that middle chunk, because I think a lot of gains can be made right in the middle. What else I have? A lot of things. Dr. Cupid McCoy, I even wrote down all grades are important, and you are correct. And while you celebrated the high school, it's so important to know the journey, that the way the students got to where they got. And I'm going to tag back on that in a second. I want to piggyback off of what Mr. Person said at the very beginning about parent involvement. I even wrote down, when you're talking about the 9th grade interventions, how are we getting parents to know that these interventions are even there? Because as a person with a high schooler, I get only the information that they want to get to me. So if somebody were to give him a handout that says, you know, ACT prep on Saturday at 9, that's probably not going to get to me. So how are we getting these 9th grade parents that kind of information?
Jeff?
So part of the process for the ninth grade interventions is parent contact. And so that was from the beginning. So when they're looking at interventions for students, they are calling the parent, they're doing parent conferences through Teams, and they're talking about the individual student's progress and the options that are in front of the student to help them get back on track. So that is an integral part of it. And the research will tell you that is a key element to ninth grade interventions are the relationships with the parents. So yes, that is embedded within.
I could not agree more. And when we're having these open houses that we're embedding on right now, to make that a highlight for these new incoming families, especially families who this is their first experience in high school. It's so important that we're kind of highlighting things like that, because to me, that's sort of like an a la carte item that you're adding to our district, and it's a great resource. Ninth grade is crucial. We took that information way back in August or September whenever we talked about getting students to enjoy going to school again and to love going to school. And we saw that at secondary it started to decline, the excitement of being in school. And it's nothing breaks my heart more when we're talking about high school is to hear a senior say, I can't wait to get out of here. And I know we've all heard it. And to me, that's something that truly bothers me. I want them to love so much where they're coming from and what they're in that they truly are going to miss it. So those are just some of the ideas I had there. Now let me circle back to something. You're right whenever we talk about, and I'll try to make this very brief, when we talk about kindergarten or even preschool experience all the way up to 12th grade, every single piece is important. And I don't know what comes first when it comes to the chicken or the egg here, but with all this progress monitoring, the PLCs, the data chats, administrators down here at the district being pulled out of their buildings, the workload on teachers, the toll on teachers that I keep hearing over and over again when I'm visiting schools, all of that is so important. But at the same time, we've got teachers with 24 and 26 students in an elementary school classroom. And I know that you mentioned, and I know, like Chair Fisher said before, this is a hard conversation to have. And it's not because I'm, blaming anyone. It's the times we're living in. You said, I know that we have limited personnel. I understand that. But when a kindergarten teacher has 24 kids in her classroom, and she's giving 5 assignments a day, that's approximately 120 papers she has to grade or he has to grade. That's 600 assignments a week that person is being faced with. That's 24 students they're taking home in their mind and in their heart every single night that they're worried about, which I know they want to. It's 24 essays they have to read. That's 24 times 5 grades they have to put in. And I know all this has to happen, but it's a big elephant in the room when we're talking about how do we get from here to there and keeping our teachers and retaining our teachers, and especially these teachers who have our 15 to 20-year veteran teachers. It's just something I continue to hear when I visit schools, the burnout. And how do we prevent that? So while all this is incredibly important, we have to remember too that we're asking a lot of our staff for things that 20 years ago when they got into this field they didn't have to do. So it's a point I wanted to make today. Dr. Bernier,
it's an excellent point, and I just want to echo the sentiments that none of this data is possible without the hard work of classroom educators, paraprofessionals, school bus drivers, principals, assistant principals, who work pretty dang hard to get this done. But you raised a very interesting point right at the very end of your comment. 20 years ago, a lot of the accountability and regulation that exists did not exist. And as accountability and regulations increased upon schools, and that's why we've been so excited about this legislative session, potentially tackling some of the deregulation of our public school systems, putting us on par with some of the other public schools that do operate within our state. So I think this board in particular has a great vision for how to work forward on those things and to lighten the load. I think another aspect of it is, and I'll walk a very fine line, but what are the key standards that have to be taught? Our state of Florida has never met a standard it didn't like. It doesn't matter whether it's a social studies, math, or science classroom. But the reality of it, there are heavily tested standards, and if we're going to prep children, because the goal of the standards of the state of Florida is not just to have kids pass tests, it's to have kids prepared for both college and career upon graduation. So if we know that particular standards are more heavily tested, or dare I say more valuable than others, how do we help educate teachers to understand they don't have to teach a mile wide, they just have to teach a little bit less width and a little more depth. I think that will free them up from some of what they're feeling. At least that's my hope, along with the deregulation work that's currently going on in Tallahassee.
Thank you for addressing that. Yeah, like I said, I wanted to make sure that you also know that, just as Mr. Fisher had said earlier, these are just conversations that we have with you all because we're out in the community hearing it. Our phones are ringing, or getting texts or emails are popping up, and I want the public to know how hard you are working behind the scenes and how hard staff is working, and that the board is listening to their concerns also. So thank you for everything that you're doing. I saw those graduation rates, and I think class of 2024 is going to rise to the occasion also, and I think that's due to the hard work that's going on in this building and the people that are on the front line, like our teachers and paraprofessionals and the rest of Lee County staff. So thank you so much. We have anything else? Ms. Giovanelli, go ahead.
I didn't get a chance to speak, so. You actually, you both brought up, Mr. Fisher brought up some of the things that I was concerned with, which some of the slippage in the high schools, but I think that they got a plan. So, and I love the presentation. Awesome. You brought up the Lee Virtual. That was one of the things I had highlighted because that was a significant increase. But, so I'm not gonna, since you brought it up, I don't have to talk about it, but the other one that I really thought was really important was East Lee County, 9+%. I mean, that's just amazing. And I know we've been working really hard out there, but I think that the attention needs to be directed there, and kudos and congratulations to them for that, because I think they might be able to shed a little light on some of our schools that have fallen a little bit in the struggles. And I think it's just, sometimes it's just the history that these students are coming out of. Their history is a pandemic, a hurricane. So, I mean, we have to give the congratulations that we still are. The increase is great, and so it's just, I don't want it to go unnoticed, and I know we didn't, but I thought it was just to see those two really high jumps was a really big deal for what, I mean, it just stood out for me. So, and thank you for bringing up the teachers, Ms. Fleming. I think that is important because they're the ones, they're in ground zero. They're the ones that did every bit of this. So, thank you. That's all. Thank you.
Ms. Morgan, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, I just want to highlight what Dr. Bernier just said. I look at data. Change is hard. Change is really hard. And giving up what you've always done and doing something differently is hard for many people. But the data, in some regards, should help teachers become more effective in the classroom, and in some cases more efficient. I realize how burdensome it is to do all of the professional development that goes with the change. I think that's asking a lot of teachers. I think it's asking a lot of staff. But the fact of the matter is, kids' achievement, kids' opportunities to learn will not get better unless we're using research-based practice, but unless we're using practices we've learned in the district that work, and we help everybody use those practices to improve student achievement. So I wanted to highlight what Dr. Bernier says, because I think that's what's behind what you all are trying to do. So that's my comment. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. You're free to go. Thank you for everything. Presentation was great. As I had stated earlier on, we were having some technological difficulties, so we are going to go back to briefing item number 2, policy review, with our attorney, Mrs. Dupay-Bruno, and they are going to go ahead and pull that up for us. So for those of you who missed it earlier, we're going to welcome School Board Attorney General Counsel Ms. Dupay Bruno and Benny Brophy from the Legal Services team to present us about policies.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. At this time, I think where we left off was a conversation on policy 2240. I did have, as normal, the opportunity to speak to board members one-on-one if they had any questions or concerns about policies. So I would like to go ahead and put up 2240 based on a conversation that I had with a board member regarding a change to the policy, which is really to strike out the first two sentences and move the last prong, which was item D, to item A.
Madam Chair, may I ask a question, please?
Yes.
Is there a hard copy of this for me to look at? Because I can't see the whole screen as I'm watching the meeting on Zoom. When I look in board docs, I don't see that corrected version by Attorney Dupay Bruno.
I'm having the same issue. It is, unfortunately, it's correct on the screen here in the district building, but it is not, it doesn't seem to be on our board docs. You are correct.
So we can go to the 2240 that is on board docs, and I can walk you through the change, the proposed change.
I appreciate that. I'm going to have a hard time approving moving it on without being able to lay eyes on it, because that's the kind of learner I am. I don't do well listening. I do much better seeing.
So you have the original policy. The suggestion that was made is that the first two sentences be stricken, and then the last prong, which is currently D, be moved up to A.
Ms. Patrica, while you're looking for that, I believe Mr. Persons had a question.
I just want to say the reasoning that I see for doing that is under most of our policies, we either define what the policy is about, and then we put the parameters on the policy. Just the first two sentences, to me, doesn't seem to do either of those two things. I mean, they may be true, but I'm just saying that it just, if you're saying that a school board believes that consideration of a controversial issue has a legitimate place in the instructional program of the schools, if you were to leave that, I'd say you would have to add, as long as, according to the parameters listed below, or something like that. It needs to have a guardrail on it, because if you just read that first sentence, it creates like a minefield for the teacher. What can I teach or not teach? If it says it's legitimate, I can have a controversial issue, then why can't I talk about something that isn't in the curriculum or whatever? I mean, it just seems, doesn't really belong there to me. So I mean, this is from Neola, that's their wording. But I just think the first two parts, if you start in the third part, it really defines what is a controversial issue. Then the rest of it defines the guardrails. That was my reasoning. First.
Mr. Fisher.
Question. Thanks. Question for Dr. Bernier and Attorney Dupay Bruno. Is this essentially what we're already doing in practice, though? Is there anything really significantly different? That's my question on this.
In terms of the first two sentences, or in terms of the entire policy?
The entire policy,
The
sorry.
entire policy is very consistent with the practices that are currently underway. And it's very clear when it begins for purpose of this policy, a controversial is. It defines it well and then gives the permission and then talks about when parents find it objectionable. So I think the idea of eliminating the first two sentences is something that's on the table and for the consideration of the board. I don't think it changes the overall impact of this particular policy.
Thank you. So the reason I'm asking is we're codifying what we're essentially already doing in practice is what my question I'm getting at is, at least to the board.
Well, this is a new policy.
I meant this policy's, that's what I said, essentially we're putting down in writing the practice that we're already doing. That's what I'm asking. It's not really a deviation.
So board, I think we just need to give direction if we're okay to move D to A. What's your actual request, Mr. Persons?
I would like to see the first two sentences stricken because I just don't think it's needed. And I definitely think as far as the guardrails A through D, that D is, as was originally done, is the most important. That it has to be introduced in compliance with state standards, laws, and board policies. That should be moved up to A.
Does anyone object to this, or should we have further discussion, Dr. Bernier?
No, I'm pointing towards the west
yeah. Ms. Patrica, are you with us on, have you been able to pull this up to get your eyes on it?
Yeah, I'm looking at the old version. I'm not comfortable removing the first two lines. If there's concern about giving guidance to teachers and letting teachers know that they have, freedom to teach without giving them the protection of knowing that they can in fact discuss and teach controversial issues and that they do have, they do. Controversial education without the discussion and study of controversial issues is no education at all. So I believe those, at least that first introductory paragraph, if not both, are essential as an introduction. I mean, no paragraph in a policy is read by itself. So a teacher or an employee couldn't come forward and say, well, the first paragraph says that I can teach controversial issues and use that as a reason to teach something inappropriately or teach something that is not in compliance with state standards, laws, and board policies. I believe the inclusion of those first two sentences provides protection, and protection is not the right word, support to our teachers. And frankly, it says what I want to say as a school board member about our system of education, about any system of education, which is that controversy is important. You got to discuss tough stuff in order to learn. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Ms. Morgan.
Yeah, I have to agree. Otherwise, why do we have debate? I would not eliminate either paragraph or sentence. I believe that belongs there. I believe that we do have to have consideration of controversial issues as long as they are compliant with state standards and laws and board policies, and that is specifically stated. So I don't need to replicate what Board Member Patrica has said. I agree with her. Thank you.
Mr. Fisher.
If you look at, though, it's already saying under where it says the board will permit the introduction, proper educational use of controversial, it's already saying right there that we're allowing it. You could argue the top is duplicative. That's just my thoughts on it.
I don't necessarily have an issue with the top two sentences necessarily. I do agree that controversial issues are discussed in school within the parameters of the law is where we have to hold teachers accountable. And so therefore, I do agree that moving D to A is something that would be important here, because then the rest falls underneath it. It's almost like the first step, if you will. So I'm fine with the top two. It is pretty much stating exactly what the statement above A through D says, but I do think D should be where A is. Any other comments, questions? Do we want to move ahead with this? Are we, Mr. Persons?
I mean, I'll go along with the wishes of the board. I just thought it was a duplicate, and I still worry, just as Mr. Patricia said, we want controversial issues to be talked about, and that's sort of what the first line says, but she didn't even go into, as long as it was in all the guardrails. You know, I mean, it just, I don't know. I just see problems down the road, but I can live with it as long as, especially we move D, which we added, up to A. I think that's really important.
Board, is that can I get a thumbs up for that? Is that, are we in agreement? Okay, you have your direction?
Thank you.
Okay.
The only other policy that I received feedback on was, there are 3 of them, but they're essentially the same language, 1232, 3232, and 4232 is slightly different because it doesn't have, it's not for classroom staff, instructional staff. So if we look at 1232, it's a very simple request, which was to, if you look at the first paragraph where it starts with "the board recognizes the right of any employee," to take out after "full responsibility as citizens," take out "living in a democracy." I think in the past we had some discussion about having to include that language, and this would be consistent with what we had, what the board had decided previously.
Board, any comments?
Yes, please.
Yes.
My question is what? What? I'm sorry, I'm not following.
I don't get it either.
The first sentence says the board recognizes the right of any employee, student, or member of the board to assume their full responsibility as citizens. And the request is to take out "living in a democracy" and just move forward to "including such citizen rights as voting." So it would read, the board recognizes the right of any employee, student, or member of the board to assume their full responsibility as citizens, including such citizens' rights as voting, discussing the social, etc.
I hear you. Thank you for that. It is not technically a democracy, so I don't have any issues with that.
Board, are you in approval of taking out "living in a democracy" from this policy? Is that a thumbs up across the board? Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
And I don't know, board members, if there are any other comments, questions, or feedback.
Ms. Patrica, do you have anything else while you're on?
I do not. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Anyone else? Comments, questions? Okay, great.
Thank you. So may we move these policies to first reading?
Yes. Are we good with that, board? Policies to first reading? Thank you. All right, we're going to give Ms. Dupay-Bruno a few moments. So I'm going to give everybody, we'll reconvene at 5:07 for just a short recess because we still have public comment, we still have good of the order, and we still have anything about the briefing this evening. Thank you.
I'll save it. I can.
I don't know where Adam went to give him the, you know. Before we go into public comment, I'd like to ask the board if you're okay with moving good of the order and comments, just waiting until this evening, because Dr. Bernier has several questions that he needs to address before that meeting. So if the board can hold their comments until this evening, is everybody okay with that? Okay, great. All right, the next item on the agenda is public comment. Attorney DePay Bruno, please address the public about public comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have no one signed up for public comment. Thank you. Oh, we do now have somebody signed up for public comment.
Do you want to address public comment?
Yes. School board policy provides the opportunity at this point in the meeting to address the board concerning any matter on this meeting's agenda. If you completed a public comment card, please provide it to the staff. Public comment will be held at the podium in the center aisle and front. Please be advised that the board will not respond during public comment to remarks made by speakers. However, at the conclusion of public comment, the chair or superintendent may respond. Speakers who fail to follow proper decorum in the chambers will be ruled out of order. Any speaker continuing with such remarks will be required to relinquish the microphone per board policy 0169.1 and may be removed from the chambers. There will be one warning. Per board policy 0169.1, the time per speaker is 3 minutes if there are 20 speakers or less. You'll find a countdown on the big screens in the front. Once your time has elapsed, the microphone will automatically shut off. Please state your name as you approach. Madam Chair, there is one speaker that wishes to address the board. And that will be Dr. Edward Dress.
Edward Drass. I sat here all this time, so I figured I'd make some comments. First of all, the agenda policy list that was addressed, I looked at it last night and reviewed it. I got up at 6 o'clock this morning, looked at it again. There were 19 PDFs there that took a lot of time to go over. And then I had some comments by email from members of the public, and they said, we have some comments and problems with this. So I went back to look at it again, and it was gone. I couldn't find it at 9 o'clock in the morning. So I don't know what happened. I was also told by one of the people that some questions would be addressed by the board, and there might be some changes made. So I don't know if what I saw here was the same thing that I reviewed last night. So just a point of clarification on that. There were some concerns that community members did bring up that I'm not sure were either addressed or will be. But it looks like this is going to be carried through and adopted this evening at the action meeting. If there are any problems that any of the board feels that need to be addressed, perhaps it would be prudent to delay the approval of these policies until those can be addressed. Second item, this Three Oaks issue, which has been kind of floating around here as a spectrum, what I'd refer to as a cranky old aunt that overstayed her welcome. I'm glad that it's finally being addressed. There's one thing, the issue itself, and then the history of it. I think the issue needs to be cleared, but you need to be very careful to be transparent with the public. This is an issue that arose under a previous board and a previous superintendent, but the public needs to know because there's a lot of ruffled feathers out there regarding this, and so put it to rest in the right way. And then the last question or issue, I guess, is in regard to the student performance data. I reviewed the state data that came out on Friday, and I'm wondering if this data from the district compares favorably with that. The state district was showed an improvement in Lee County schools in general, and specifically in the schools that were mentioned in this data, but I assume this was all generated in-house rather than no, it wasn't okay. I know you can't answer from the dais, but those were the things I wanted to address, and you know, again, thank you for your efforts in directing this district and manning the ship as you're doing.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is good of the order and board comments. Due to the time, we are going to allow Dr. Bernier.
You have to do agenda review.
Agenda review.
Oh, excuse me, that's right. Dr. Bernier or Attorney Bruno, is there anything for the agenda review?
Not with regards to agenda review, but I didn't know if you wanted a clarification with regards to one of the comments that was made by the speaker, just for clarification.
Sure.
Because this was a pre-brief of the policies, and we will have a first reading of the policies on February 6th, and then the public hearing will be on February, the second meeting in February, and both of those will afford public comment. In addition, the policies that were on board docs are the policies that we reviewed today. So I think board docs was having some issues today.
The only other comment I'd like to make is to the question of whether that was internal data or state data. The data reported today was the state data that they provided to the school district. So those numbers, and thank you for the kind words regarding the hard work of both our principals, our teachers, and our district office team.
Okay, we will move to agenda review.
Agenda review, I do have a few questions. Well, the first one is about public comment. E1, approvals of information for public participation at board meetings, school board policy 0169.1. The question asks, can you please explain the differences or changes from the prior policy? There are currently no changes to the policy. The only change that I noticed was the subject of a link at the bottom of the page. That link actually takes you to our school board policy. It was put there on for this particular meeting and moving forward. So if people wanted to get directly to the policy, they had a link and access to it. The second question is consent from academic services. H2, the ratification of the memorandum of understanding with the Rotary Foundation Global Grant, number GG 2453870. Can you explain the grant and the impact it has on the district? The memorandum of understanding that's connected to this item on the agenda this evening supports Fort Myers Beach Elementary School. The Rotary Foundation actually specifically reached out to Fort Myers Beach Elementary with a grant funding opportunity. They will receive $236,876 from the Rotary to support their STEAM initiatives, including educating students on the environmental impacts out on Fort Myers Beach. Then there is a number of questions on a consent item for operations. That is the approval to pursue the sale of the 69 plus acres of the SDLC property at 3 Oaks Parkway. Responses generally came from myself, our Chief of Staff, and Dr. Malloy. Can you please provide me with the surplus land list? We will provide a full list of that as we did in the fall, and we still plan to come back in the spring and review that surplus land list and get further direction as to what we would like to put out on the market for sale. SLD currently has 2 properties listed for sale, one at 13401 Palomino Lane. It's an 18 plus acre parcel of vacant land. And the second one is 1421 Northeast 15th Avenue. That is a 9.8 acre parcel. Both were approved on the surplus list, and we are actively marketing those properties. The question also regarding the sale with Florida Statute 373089, are we violating the law? I believe that has been asked and answered during the briefing today, but I will share with you that we have found no violation of either that statute or the one that we're definitively required to follow, which is Florida Statute 1013.28. Can you please provide me a total itemized cost of the building plans of the Innovation School, starting with the purchase of Block Lane, those building fees and costs? Prior board abandoned those buildings and jumped to the Three Oaks property and started building process on that property to include steel purchase for Innovation School on those two sites. We need total expenditures for those two sites. It should be audited by RSM like we are doing on Riverdale. As I explained in the briefing today, but it's important to note, the Innovation School was never going to be on the Three Oaks parcel. Three Oaks parcel was the Three Oaks parcel was always going to be the quadruple A pre-K-8 school, which was built as a combination of the elementary and middle school, originally planned to be built behind Estero High. There was talk that these two schools would be utilized as an innovation school. However, that changed when it went to Three Oaks at the time. Phase 1 of the total cost went to the board for an increase to purchase structural steel. I'm happy to say that in the course of the briefing today, the operations team has already mobilized a Google Doc with various folders in it to pull together the information that you asked regarding how much other material was spent or work was purchased, like steel, plans, other things related to building a school on the Three Oaks property, and I believe I can have that information potentially for the board in terms of a draft spreadsheet before the end of the week. Can you please provide me a copy of the resolution that was mentioned in the briefing PowerPoint? Should we not approve the surplus land before selling the property? Board approved the 5-year educational plant survey completed by the CRA architects on 6/27/23. That was the last time we talked about surplus property. So subject to the rules, we do believe that the board has approved this land for sale, and we were transparent in our processes as we move through and forward. We need to probably continue to have a dialogue about the sale and purchase of property as a board, so that this superintendent and anyone in the future can meet the expectations of what the board would like in terms of what we mean by transparency, right? Transparency, if you talk about good communication, you talk to 5 people, everybody has a different definition of it. We really need to talk about what we mean. What page is the Three Oaks property listed on in the 369-page plant survey as mentioned in the briefing? Page number 170. And no other properties are recommended for disposition in the 5-year plant survey. 2 have already been approved via the previous spot surveys or plant surveys, and a comprehensive list will be provided in a board update and further discussion regarding surplus property. In the past, we've been briefed on all properties owned by the district and a plan to keep a list for sale. Are we going to have a briefing? A presentation will be put together at the board's request, and we'll schedule it for February or early March. Then there are 2 questions, one about an 18.96 acre parcel, which was under contact twice, as well as a C attached ratification agreement to sell an 18.96 parcel on Palomino Lane. I would ask the board for the opportunity to put together complete and thorough answers to both these. I've not had the opportunity, nor has staff, to read all the attached contracts and other information, and we will make sure we provide that information because those are not directly related to the sale of the Three Oaks property on the agenda this evening. And those are all the questions I received. Any board member discussion?
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion or comments? Okay, with that being said, we're going to hold our good of the order and comments for this evening. We will reconvene tonight at 6 p.m. for our scheduled action meeting. At this point, having no other business to come before this body and seeing no objection, this meeting is adjourned, and the time is 5:21 p.m. Have a good afternoon.